Alright, so let's start going over loops and range in Golang. Let's get started. So in previous tutorials, we went over maps, we went over arrays, we went over slices, and these items were placed into, like I said, boxes, and we were able to retrieve them by using an index or by using a key. But there's also another way that we can retrieve these items. We can loop through them. We can iterate through them. What do I mean by iteration? I mean, we can go through them one by one and retrieve first the index, and we can also retrieve the actual value. So let's see an example of this. So the first thing I want to go over to loop through one of these is a for loop. All right. So what is a for loop? It is a way for us to go step by step using a starting value and an ending value, but we have to let Golang know where we want to start at and where we want to start at and where we want to stop. So let's create a for loop. So a for loop is created by using the keyword for, and here is where I want to let Golang know where I want to start. So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it I, and I am going to assign it a value of 0. This is letting Golang know that I want to create a for loop, which is going to be used to iterate items or this index that I'm creating or this variable that I'm creating one by one, or however much that I'm going to let it know to step by. So I'm going to start this value at 0, and the next criteria that I'm going to set up is where I want it to stop. So I want to continue going until while I is less than 10, right? So once it gets to 10, I know that I can stop, but while it's less than 10, I want to continue going step by step. And remember, you have to put a colon for each criteria. So for the first criteria, I want to set it up for it to be equal to 0, this I. And then the second criteria is I want it to keep going as long as I is less than 10. Now I'm going to put another semicolon, and I'm going to pass in the last thing that I wanted to do. And this is how many times I wanted to step through. So what I mean by step through is, okay, how is it going to go? What's the pattern is going to be when it goes from 0 to 10? Is it going to, go by 1? Is it going to go by 3? Is it going to go by 2? This can be created using this criteria right here. So I can do I plus 1, which means that I want to go 1 by 1. I can do I plus 2, meaning I can do, from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6. I'm going to keep it at 1. And, you can even do plus plus. Open up some curly braces, and now within these curly braces, we have now set up, a variable called I that will iterate, or that will, create a loop that will go one at a time until it reaches the value that is less than 10. So once it gets to 10, it will stop. And remember, we're starting at 0, so it's going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. Because while it's less than 10, it's going to keep going. But once it gets to 10, it's going to stop. So we can actually take a look at how this looks by using fmt, print, len, and then we can pass in the variable that we created, which is holding the value of each step, and put it here, I. And I got to import fmt, and then save it. And then do go run, and then boom, you will see that it starts at 0 and it goes all the way to 9. That is the expected output. Now, like I was saying before, you don't have to do one at a time. We can make that equal to I, and then make it equal to I plus 2. So take the current I and assign that to I plus 2. And let me clear this out, and we can run that again. Go run. Boom. So now you see that it's going from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8, and then it doesn't even reach to 10, because once it gets to 10, it doesn't pass this check that I is less than 10. Now, we said that if I is less than or equal to 10, it will actually take in that 10, because once I is less than or equal to 10, meaning that it will take the 10, we can continue going. But once it goes over 10, that's when it won't do it. So let's see. So now you'll see that it actually includes 10, because it's okay if it equals 10, but once it goes over 10, that's when it'll be an issue. So it's from 10 and anything less than 10. And we're going by 2, and you can use any number. We can even use 5 if we want to. So we should expect to just see 0, 5, and 10 because it's iterating by 5. It's increasing by 5. It's adding 5 each step, and then once it gets to 10 or anything past 10, it'll stop. So that is how you use a for loop. Now, when I was talking about arrays and slices, how can this be useful, right? Well, when we think back on an array and when we think back on a slice, what makes them so amazing is the fact that how Go puts that data in these boxes, and these boxes are retrieved using a thing called an index. We talked about this, right? These index usually start at a value. Like if you want to retrieve the first value in this, slice, or if you want to retrieve the first value in an array, what do? We provide the index of 0 because remember, it starts at a 0 and it increments up. So how can we use a for loop and array together? Let's see. So let's create, actually I'm just going to create a slice, call it S. Then open it up. I'm not even going to provide a limit. I'm just going to make sure that it is an int. Open this up, and then I'm just going to put some values in here. So 5, 6, 7, and then I'm going to save that, right? And then I'm going to change this I to increment by 1 each time again. And now what I'm going to print is I'm going to print each item in this slice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the variable that's holding the slice, open up some brackets, and I'm going to place the I inside of it. Now, I don't want to go up to 10 because that can be dangerous, and I actually want to see that, right? I want to see what would happen if I keep iterating when I know that the length is, beyond what's actually inside the slice. What happens? Well, a big problem happens. It panics because look, the slice length is 3, right? But we're letting this for loop know that we want to go all the way up to 10. That's an issue because there is no value at past 3. So that will break it. That will cause it to panic, and it will let you know right here, like, okay, the index is out of range, right? So keep in mind when you're trying to use a for loop with this index or with these with this array or slice, keep in mind you have to know the length of the array or slice because it will throw an error if you do that. So what you could do is you can check while I is less than the length of S. Remember, we have this function of length that just returns how many items is in the slice or an array. So we know that once it gets past or once it's equal to the actual length of S, we can stop because remember, a slice and array starts at 0, right? So if there's 3 items in this array or slice, it will be, let me just put this in a comment, it will be 0, 1, 2, right? Because 0 will retrieve 5, 1 will retrieve 6, 2 will retrieve 7. So we don't need 3 because 3 will be out of range of the actual slice or array. So we don't have to make it less than or equal to the length of the slice. We can make it less than the length of the slice because we don't need 3. We just need 0, 1, and 2 because we're starting at 0, right? We're not starting at 1, right? Because if we started at 1, we can only retrieve 6 and 7. But since we're starting at 0, we can retrieve the first value in this slice, which is 5. And if we try to use the actual length, it's going to get 3, and 3 is beyond the bounds of this array. So while I is less than the length of S, which in this case it would just go up to 2, we can retrieve everything within this slice, an array. If we were using an array, like if we actually put a limit of 3 here, we're using an array, but I'm just going to use a slice here. So let's actually print that. And let me clear this out. Go run, and boom, that is how we retrieve it. All right, we could do, so we see 5, 6, and 7, so we can retrieve everything with the array, no problem. We don't have to worry about it going out of bounds because we're restricting it to just using the length of S, which is just the length of this slice. So cool, now you see another way of retrieving items from an array. And remember, we can even do that logic of incrementing by 2 if we want to. So if we can do I plus 2, we can do that. So we should just expect to see 5 and 7 is what I'm expecting. So go run. So now you see that it's ignoring the middle piece because it's just going to go from 0 all the way up to 2, which is going to be 7. And then remember, it's going to end at the length of S, which if it goes past 3, or if it equals to 3 and beyond, then we're done, right? This loop is going to be finished because this criteria is false now, right? I is not going to be less than the length, because if we continue to increase by 2, the next value for this is going to be, all right, 0, 2, and there's going to be 4. There's nothing at 4. We can just close it out and we're good to go. So that is how you can use a for loop to iterate arrays. You can use it to, even if you just needed to get go step by step from a starting point to ending point, you can use it. It doesn't necessarily have to be used for arrays and slices, but that's one way that a lot of people usually use it, whether you're doing an interview or whether you're using it for any other thing. All right, so I already showed some love to, showing how to iterate a slice, an array, but let's show some love to how to iterate a map, but using another way of iteration, which is range. All right, so before we use the for loop to iterate through a slice and an array, we could just use the variable that we defined to retrieve it using an index. But there is another thing that we can use called range. So let's do that. Let's actually first define a map. I'm going to set that equal to a map, and I'm going to have the key be an int and the value be a string, and open that up. Set the key equal to 1. The first thing is going to be Geo. The second thing is going to be Bobby. We got some reoccurring characters from the previous videos. Save that. And now we can create the range, right? So what we will do is we'll also use the keyword of for, but now we can define what we're going to extract from the thing that we're going to iterate. So what I want to extract is the key, and this can be any name. This can be K, this can be KE, whatever you want, but I know that I'm trying to retrieve a key, so I'm just going to use the variable name of key. But remember, you can use any variable name that you want. And the second thing that we're going to extract from whatever we're iterating is the value. This can be V, this can be anything. This can be gibberish if you want to, but I'm going to define it as value just to make sure that it's a clarifying variable name that I understand and that other people can understand. And it is going to be equal to, so I'm going to use the colon equal and assign it to the range of whatever we're going to iterate, which is name. So what it's going to do is it's going to iterate through name, but it's going to extract the key and the value of whatever is in name, in the map of name. So we created a map, right? And the key is an int, so we have 1 and 2, and the values are a string, which right here we have Geo and Bobby. So we should expect to see, as we iterate through this, the key and value of whatever we have inside this map. And what is this right here? Let me see. Missing a comma. I didn't use the actual colon. I used a semicolon by accident. All right, cool. So let's print that out. And I'm going to use a print format. And let me import FMT. And then open that up. Create a little prompt. So let's say the key is, and I know the key is going to be a int, so I'm just going to provide a decimal, and the value is a string, so I'm just going to use this format, and then I'm going to pass in a key and the value, and I always forget to put a new line. Let me do that, and let me save that. So let me just go over again what I'm doing. I'm creating a iteration using a key and value that's being extracted from this name. So we're using the keyword of for because we're iterating through it through the range of name. This is another keyword that we're going to use pretty much that will allow us to extract the key and value from whatever we're going to retrieve from. So in this case, this is going to be a map of a key type of int and a value type of string. And created a little prompt. The key is whatever is going to inject is the key, and the value is the value that's going to inject. So let's run that. Boom. The key is 1 because that's what we defined here, and the value is Geo. And the key is 2 for the second one, and the value is Bobby. So that's how we can iterate through a map. Pretty simple, because now we don't have to memorize what exactly is the key. We can just iterate through it one by one, visualize and see what the key is. It was going to return the key to us, and it's going to return the value for us. All right, and we're not just restricted to just using maps. We can also use slices. I just wanted to show some love to maps because we've been using slice and arrays a lot, right? But I I haven't shown any love to the maps. But let me just use like a slice right now. So I'm gonna bring back slice from the first part, and I'm gonna create a slice that is of type int, and I'm gonna use the same values 5, 6, and 7. All right, and then I'm gonna pass it in this range. So instead of using name, which is a map, I'm gonna use s, and it's not getting mad at us. The only thing that is getting mad is the fact that we're not using name anymore. So I'm just gonna comment this out, and I am going to still use this same format, but now we know that this array is of type int, so now we can't use a string for the format. We have to use another d. All right, and so it should be happy now. So what we're gonna do is we're iterating through this s variable that's holding this array or this slice, because we're not providing a limit, so it's a slice. It's gonna grow as we put things into it, so that's what a slice is. And the key is going to be the index in this case, because we're not defining a key like we would with a map, but it is still placed inside, or it is stored inside of this slice by this index, which is, I guess, would be considered the key, right? And then the value would be whatever is at that index. So in this case, it'll be 5 if the index is 0, 6 if the index is 1, and 7 if the index is 2. And we can prove that by printing this out. So as you can see, the hypothesis was true, right? You can see the key is 0, and it's retrieving the value of 5 as expected, 6, 7, and the expected output of the key was 1 and 2 for those respective numbers. So that is another way that we can iterate a array and a map, a slice, and Go. But let's say we didn't want the key, we just want the value, right? We don't care about the key. We can use I believe this is an underscore, right, to let Go know that, okay, we don't really care for the value for key. We just need the value. So we can remove this key, because now we don't have that variable that's holding a key anymore. And let me remove this, and I'm just gonna say the value is, and this should work as expected. Let me clear this out, Go run, and boom, the value is 5, 6, and 7, because we don't need the key. So whatever you don't need, just use a little underscore, and it's just gonna ignore it. It's gonna act like it didn't exist. We just retrieving one variable, or we're just extracting one thing from this whatever we're using. So if it's a slice, if it's an array, we are just extracting one variable from it, which in this case is gonna be the value. Just know that the order of these two things matter. Like on the left side is gonna be key always, and then the right side is always gonna be value. So if you don't want the key, then you put an underscore. If you don't want the value, then you can also put an underscore here and just take the key. And then we can use key here if we want to, and the key can be printed as well. So then it'll just say the key is 0, 1, and 2, as you can see, right? Completely different from what we see above here, which is showing 5, 6, and 7. The order of these two things matter. Now, we can also just extract it, period, right? We could just remove that first piece, and now we would just retrieve the key just the whole time. So let's clear this and then run it. So now it will just retrieve the key, but now we have no ability to get the value. We would then have to do what we did before, is either like putting the underscore and the value and then using it, or you can just put both of key and value. It's really up to you. Like, what do you need at that specific point of time? But if you know you're just gonna use the key, then you can just not use the second variable and just provide key, and that will extract it. But you can't just use value and expect it to work. It's not gonna work, right? It's gonna think that you're trying to use the key, which in this case is not. So it's not the variable name that extracts it. It's the actual position of which you're defining the variable. So if it's just one thing, it's gonna think you're just trying to retrieve the key. But if you're using two things, it's gonna think you're trying to retrieve the key and the value. Or you could just ignore the key and retrieve the value, and vice versa. So that is how you use range in Go. That is how you iterate through slices, arrays, and maps in Go. So you can either use a for loop for keys and slices, um, or if you have somehow you have a slice of keys, you can iterate through that using a for loop and then use those keys to retrieve something in a map. I feel like that's way too difficult. Just use a range to iterate through things in a map. So I showed both ways, and you guys can go around and play with that and see, how that works. So hope you guys enjoyed.